improvements were kind of stemming from what I'll call localized neighborhood flooding in roadways, driveways, yards, basements, kind of from inadequate stormwater management controls within the street. So we decided to bend the scope a little bit and include those in the study. So this first step was to delineate the existing drainage area. We use existing plans, we use contours, we did some on-site survey. We had some of the storm drains within that Brookside neighborhood television inspected. We did some runoff estimates. We use NOAA's precipitation frequency estimates for that. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So like we'll talk about, we ran numbers for a whole gamut of storms, but we'll talk about kind of the more frequent ones, a 2-year 24-hour storm, that's 3 inches plus or minus in 24 hours. And then the larger kind of hurricane type events, that's about 7.5 inches in 24-hour period for the models. So for the analysis, first we did a capacity analysis. So we took a look at like how much flow each of the obstructions along the creek can carry. There's a couple culverts, there's bridges, whether those bridges go over roads or like people's driveways. And then there's actually in Ambler Yards, there's a building on top of the creek. So that's a bit of an obstruction as well. We took a look at what improvements we could do to reduce the rate and volume, and then how much of a benefit those can provide. And then, we'll continue to investigate the localized flooding issues and kind of try to come up with some ideas for that. We want to identify potential improvements and then come up with recommendations and priorities. This is a FEMA map of the study area, kind of just shown there. The Houston Creek is this stem here, and it is a tributary of the Wissahickon Creek. The main channel of the Wissahickon Creek is over here. This is actually Whitpain, and then the septic tracts are right in this area there. If you want to go to the next slide, JB, there's an aerial that'll orientate us a little better. So this is just showing the entirety of the drainage area for the study. The creek kind of comes underneath the septic tracts here and then makes its way through a series of pipes and culverts within the Ambler Yards development. And then it's under Spring Garden Street here. And then it's through these backyards of houses that front on Brookside and or Marion up through there, and then under a culvert under Knight Road. And there's a existing dam on the school district's property here. The headwaters, or the beginning of this stream is somewhere in here. If you walk in through here through the school district's property, like you will certainly see base flow in the stream. But as far as like floodplain mapping starts, FEMA's map starts it right at the dam, and that's kind of where our analysis and study points kind of all downstream of the dam. But
Jim, sorry.
No, yeah.
A question.
Yep.
So is that, you're calling that Houston Creek?
Yeah.
Is that a real creek, or is it just due to development that it's a catchment area?
No, I think it's a real creek. It's on FEMA's map. It's called Houston Creek. I didn't name it that, but it would have been a good idea. And yeah, so no, it's a real stream. It has base flow. It's I think a situation where, and many situations happen like this all over the county, where development happens directly adjacent to, and sometimes creeks get enclosed. There's tons of enclosed creeks all through Ambler Borough. But there's base flow in there, and it's a stream. Okay,
so are there any EPA or other protections for a stream?
Yes, there are DEP protections for a stream, and then because FEMA has floodplain around this particular stream, there are also floodplain management requirements.
Okay, well, go ahead and finish, but I'd be interested in hearing how that creek is is going to be preserved if any work along those lines is done?
Okay. Wait,
That runs into the Wissahickon, right?
it does, yes.
Okay.
So the total drainage area to what is a study point is the SEPTA culvert is this entire magenta outline here, and it's 280 acres. It encompasses all these neighborhoods down in here, Brookside, Marion, Francis, most of the Wissahickon School District's campus, the high school actually, and the high school and the football field drain to a different creek. So they're not within this drainage area, but the elementary school and middle school, the admin building, all that's in this drainage area. Part of Ambler is in here across Mount Pleasant, and then all the way up to the neighborhoods in Lower Gwinnett that are along Aileen and Judy are also in here. Before we move on, we just want to point out that like existing stormwater management controls, like basins or dams or anything that's supposed to control rate of flooding, there's only 3 in this entire development. There's the existing dam with the school district, which we'll see a picture of in a minute. There's a basin that was built or it's adjacent to the admin building for the school district. I think it was actually built when they built the elementary school. And then when Ambler Yards did their land development 4 or 5 years ago, there's an underground basin on their property. But other than that, there is not one bit of conventional stormwater management controls in this entire 280 acres, which is contributing to a lot of the issues that we're seeing. So Jamie, if we could go to the next slide. What we're doing here is the first part. I'm going to go through the first part of the analysis, and that was conveyance capacity. We'll start all the way upstream. This is the dam where the study kind of begins. This is a picture, top one downstream of the dam, and then if you scroll down, the next one is the top side of the dam. It's essentially an obstruction built over the creek that in low flows, there's a pipe at the bottom. The low flow gets through, and anytime there's a larger event, there's an impoundment area behind it that can allow for some water to pound up or build up and then get slowly metered out there. It's a DEP regulated dam, so like it has a dam number. The school district inspects it on a yearly basis. Nothing that I really see leads me to believe that it's being poorly maintained. It just isn't of a size enough to control the runoff from 125 acres that get to it. My understanding is that it was built when the middle school was built to offset some of the stormwater from the middle school, but I don't really have plans that show that or anything. Just kind of what I've heard. If you come down here, this is the Knight Road culvert. It's just a standard box culvert. It's about 3 feet tall and 8 feet wide. And that's the upstream side of it. If you continue down, that's the downstream side, same exact cross section. And then at each of these obstructions, or the major ones, we did a capacity analysis using open flow channel calculations based on the size of the opening and what the construction of it is. And so we're going to talk about conveyance capacity, but we have 580 cubic feet per second. That's the most that can go through that structure there. So as we continue down, found a couple smaller like pedestrian bridge type things. This is the house. The address is 450 Marion, but it's really on the corner of Knight and Marion. It's got a 4 foot high by 10 foot wide opening, and the elevation there is similar to what the elevation is of the of the Knight Road culvert. So it's really just whatever flows under Knight Road can also flow under this pretty easily. If we continue down here, this is I think it's an old driveway that would have served a house on 448 Marion. We're standing taking this picture on Brookside. So there's a couple of houses that are they're rear loaded from Brookside, but their address is actually Marion. So they have double frontages. If you continue to the next picture, there's a side view of that culvert there. There's some bamboo or something in the way, but that opening, if you keep going down, Jamie, is even wider than the previous ones. It's 4 feet high and it's 11 feet wide. So like its flow capacity is almost triple what the Knight Road culvert is. So at that point, like whatever can get through Knight Road can also get through here pretty easily. We're coming up to the next one here. This is a similar driveway bridge for a house on Marion, but the driveway comes off of Brookside. And if you it's concrete construction, looks like there were 2 pipes laid in here that maybe at one point were full size circles, but they're kind of like half circles now. And then when we do that calculation, we have 200 CFS of capacity there. So like a third of what can get through Knight Road. And so now we've got an obstruction that is like causing a pinch point when we run.
Is this the first choke point? Is this the first significant one from the dam down, right?
Yeah.
Culvert or the dam?
Let's say the dam is the beginning, right?
Dam's the beginning. That doesn't actually, I mean, it's an obstruction, but we're not analyzing its capacity.
Right.
Yes.
From there, we start our analysis and everything is fine up until here when we have a pinch point or choke point.
Yeah. And when we look at the floodplain and now like we'll be able to see it too. But so this is like the first recommendation, and that's to explore replacement removal to increase the capacity here. The tricky point with this one is that it's not within the township right of way, so it's on private property, and it's their only way to get into the back of their house, which is like where their driveway and their garage is. They have like a basement garage. So I mean, there's certainly hurdles to that. To just full removal, I should say there's hurdles too.
So does the township have an easement with waterways?
The township, to
Or
my
the
knowledge, doesn't
county?
have any easements.
So we have no control over a waterway that's on private property.
The waterway, it's not, the bridge is on.
I know, but
The
there
bridge
wouldn't be a
spans
bridge
the
there if there
waterway.
wasn't water.
But no, there's no blanket. I mean, Neil can talk to this.
Yeah, there's no blanket easement over the waterway. Essentially, it's whatever private riparian rights exist among the property owners.
Okay.
So as we continue down from that point, there's really no obstructions that we found as we walked, the backyards. But then we get down to, this is the Knight Road. I mean, this is the Spring Garden culvert. So this top picture, you're looking at a side view of that. There's 2 fairly significant pipes that then transition into an 8x4 box culvert. We're looking right here in this bottom picture, we're standing at the transition point between the pipes and the box culvert and looking upstream. And one thing we want to note is that there's like a significant amount of sediment that's kind of accumulated in there. This bridge is owned by PennDOT. So one of the recommendations we're making is that the township engage with PennDOT to figure out what is the plan for maintenance, continued maintenance there, because that's a situation where you certainly want to have that cleaned out on some sort of regular basis, and specifically before like hurricane season, because anything that gets picked up and washed down is going to also show you where it's going to go. But as far as like capacity of that, if it's cleaned out, it's 670 CFS, so it's slightly higher than some of the upstream ones, which makes a lot of sense, because as you go downstream, your flow area is increasing, so your flow is increasing too.
So just to clarify, you're saying with that sediment, it's 250?
No, I'm just saying, what we're saying is that like, if it was to be filled in with sediment to a point and you looked at like the roughness coefficient of that sediment, like it has the ability to reduce it pretty significantly. I don't think that it's actually only carrying 250.
So just so that we can guesstimate what that looks like, is that picture a reflection of a severe?
I don't think that, no, I mean,
That's
on
not
on this right side, it's starting to get there. I mean, you can see that it's kind of like maybe a third filled. If that other side was that same way, then you're starting to see a pretty significant reduction.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. This is the building that I mentioned with Ambler Yards, where it's literally on top of the creek. This is their building 19. The 8x4 box culvert that we were just standing in on Spring Garden Street it transitions into these 3 36-inch pipes that go underneath this building 19. When you take a look at the capacity of all 3 of those pipes combined, it's only 250 CFS, whereas some of those upstream ones were 500, 600 plus. So this is certainly another pinch point, and something that when we gave the presentation to Ambler Yards, when we talked to Matt and Mark, we said that one of the recommendations to them, not necessarily my recommendation to the township to do anything on this private property, is to explore replacement of those pipes with a box culvert that has capacity equal to, or essentially equal to what is the downstream septic culvert, which is the next picture here. If you take a look here, building 19 is behind me. This bridge here is the one that we've been talking about, them widening for fire access. That's a project that Ambler Yards is committed to. And then if you look in the distance there, you start to see the septic tracks are there, and then there's a culvert underneath those tracks. If you go to the next picture, I think, yeah, that's it there. There's a trash rack against it, which is a really good thing, considering that like you don't want any debris to get lodged in the center of that pipe. You would want it to be pushed up against there. But then we did some survey of that and found out, if you go down, so there's a box culvert and a circular pipe. When you add them up together, they can carry about 615 CFS. So it's pretty similar. I mean, not exactly the same as some of the upstream stuff, but it's kind of similar. Do we have any questions, or we'll keep going? Okay. So the next step was to try to figure out what some of the capacity issues could be fixed by upsizing pipes or removing some obstructions. But generally speaking, the only way to fix some of these issues is to provide more detention within the watershed, which doesn't exist today. So
slow down the flow from the top.
Yes, exactly. So we start to look at areas within the watershed that can support those improvements. And really what you're looking for is like available land. So, Ambler Yards is built out. If they do improvements anywhere, they could probably fit some more underground basins in there, but like from a just volume standpoint, it's really not helping, and it's at the bottom anyways, because we want to concentrate things towards the top so the most people can benefit. The neighborhoods, there's a similar situation where there's not a lot of available land. So we start to look at the school district and their available space. There is a little tributary, or it's really a drainage ditch, but it comes in here and bypasses the dam and takes flow from like all the way up to the school district parking lot, in the high school parking lot, all of Houston Road, and the existing smaller basin from the admin building, discharges to that swale and comes over here. We get some videos that a neighbor sent us during a pretty significant thunderstorm over the summer where there was over an inch of rain in 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So a very high intense flash flood type situation. And Knight Road culvert was nearly filled. Like it was a few inches from the top. And a majority of that water was coming from this point over here, this part that bypasses the dam. So one potential solution, one potential project that can help this is a new stormwater basin on the corner of Houston and Knight Road. That's the school district's property. So anything would be a partnership with them. But that could catch this 30+ acre drainage area over there. And then another benefit to that is that you could write the grant application to retrofit the existing basin that's on the school district's property, potentially increasing it in size. And then having basins in series it's like an exponential gain from a rate reduction standpoint, because everything that drains to here fills up, takes time to spill out, and then has to take more time. So you're just you're drawing out the attenuation. So those two improvements are something that we definitely look at. And then the dam itself was kind of the next thing on our radar. China, we would love to kind of mirror this situation and like do it over here too, because if you look at it, it's sort of like the center goes to the dam, this side goes to here, this side over here comes in this way. But unfortunately this is I think it's Montgomery Road, the development there, and then there's a couple houses that front on Knight also. So wasn't really an opportunity there, unfortunately.
Just to be clear, that the Montgomery, that area that you're talking about, that's kind of almost Lower Gwinnett and where Ambler meet, where is that draining to? Is that what's going down Francis?
So based on the contours, the bottom part of this Montgomery development comes towards Knight Road and then goes towards the culvert there. This top part of it goes to the creek, which runs in through here and then ultimately gets to the dam. So this little yellow line is what gets to the dam. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So anything that's below that yellow line is just coming to the homes?
It's coming.
Trying to get down.
Yeah, it's working its way probably this way, I would imagine. But yeah, I mean, it's coming to.
To Francis and Brookside, trying to get down to the creek.
Yes.
So
Jim,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Danielle,
No, I was
finish your
just gonna say,
thought.
so is that the water that the individuals that reside on Francis Avenue are experiencing as it relates to the
Yeah.
flooding in their backyard and front yards?
So this green blob down here is kind of the area where I'm talking about localized neighborhood flooding. And this street here's Francis. What is happening is water comes down Francis. There's only like 1 or 2 inlets and a pipe through these backyards to the creek here. And it's just overwhelmed. And then it spills over their curb cuts. And because Francis is higher than Brookside, the water runs through the yards of Francis, through the backyards of Brookside and down towards the creek. When we were out there, people told us that this hasn't historically always been the case.
Mhm.
And they kept saying, the township paved Francis, and that's when this started to happen. The type of paving that we did on Francis is the ultra thin overlay, which doesn't really have the ability to affect drainage like that because they mill along the curb line and then they put like an 1/8 inch down. But when we started talking and started thinking about it, it was around the same time that some of those water main breaks were happening. And there was a big one at this intersection, Francis and Knight. And so there's the potential that when the repaving happened from fixing the water main breaks, that like the gutter line and the crown of that road at that intersection kind of got lost. So instead of water continuing down night, like it maybe historically had done, it's making a turn on Francis and kind of providing more that way. So one of the recommendations that we have is to do some extensive survey in this area at the intersection and take a look at like whether recontouring that intersection, potentially adding an inlet or two there to kind of get water to go where it had historically gone, might provide some relief to the people on Francis.
Jim, so I'm still trying to understand the origin of this water. Is when this is called a creek where the dam is, does that mean that there's water in it all year round? Or like there's a spring that is the origin of this creek? Or is it just a gully that fills up when there's a lot of rain?
No, I think that there's base flow in the stream, which is essentially exposed groundwater. Like that's what base flow in a stream is. At a certain point, the topography is low enough that the ground, we call it a spring, call it groundwater,
Yeah.
it is exposed and begins to trickle downhill.
So before any development, then this would have been a tributary for the Wissahickon, but now it's more than that. It carries stormwater because of all the development. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
accurate.
Is there any way to understand how the headwater of that above the dam could be restored to make it more resilient to flooding, like a wetland area?
I mean, if you want to restore it to what it was, you got to take all the houses and
And
roads
we gotta
out.
get rid of the schools.
No,
I don't
you
mean to be like that, but you could look at, if you were going to do an improvement somewhere, like say you were going to do an improvement to the dam, or you were going to do some kind of riparian restoration on the school district property. Like you could certainly do things in that area that would have a benefit to water quality, but absent of like taking out all the impervious and the improvements, I don't know how you can sort of restore it.
Yeah, well, obviously you can't restore something that's running under a building, but if there are wetlands to help absorb, just like the basins are there to help absorb and the water percolates down, that takes pressure off the downstream flooding. And so not only that, as we know, the major contaminant of the Wissahickon is particles, so soil particles. So what can we do, to help prevent that?
I think so. The basins that we would design, that we talked about, the one on the corner of Houston and Knight, it would have multiple functions. So like one function would be controlling the rate, like what we've been talking about, just because that's kind of the number one way to reduce the flooding. But then we would do soil testing, and if the underlying soils could take and promote infiltration, then we would design the basin to be infiltrating an amount of water. I don't know if they would or wouldn't. A lot of times when you're right next to a floodplain, the soils aren't really conducive to infiltration, but we would certainly try. And then the last function would be water quality. The bottom of it would be planted with native species. They would be sucking up some of the water, collecting some of the pollutants.
Mhm.
There would be 4 bays in every basin that the first flush of pollutants come in and they settle down, and it spills over into like the main part of the basin that collects your sediments. And then like on a yearly basis, you'd have to go through and hog those out and restore them to their volume and you essentially get rid of the collected sediment. It's Fred's job. That's why Fred hates me. At least I said it out loud, so you're not surprised.
Oh, that sounds good then, Jim. Anything to help restore sort of the headwater absorption potential.
Yeah,
Seems
and
good.
so there's the good that comes from doing that, and then there's also the reality that as we design the basins like that, it opens us up to a lot more grant opportunities. All these grant agencies want to see your basins, increasing the water quality. So we would definitely do that for a myriad of reasons.
And then, okay, I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but not just above the dam and the other basin that you've proposed, which I think are wonderful, but are there any potentials for increasing the riparian edges along the creek as it goes further down?
I don't. So on the school district property, if you walk in through here, I feel like you'd be probably pleasantly surprised with how much vegetation there is on each side of the dam, or on each side of the creek as it leads up to the dam. As you go through the neighborhood, there's not that much opportunity just because the yards are small and the distance between their backyard and the creek is not much. So
Okay.
it's really, there's places where that works. I don't know if that works downstream of the dam. Upstream of the dam, I think there are some things that exist today that are helping out. And, one of the overarching recommendations is also, aside from these new basins and this dam, like just having a continuing ongoing conversation with the school district whenever they come in with a project. Is there a potential to maybe do more stormwater management than would be required by the ordinance to kind of try to help and offset? And I'm not saying like stick that whole bill on them, but like at least have the conversation. Could it be over designed? I'm thinking like at a certain point, they're probably going to want to redo this track and fields behind the middle school. Right now, the whole middle school and parking lot drain to pipes that run underneath this and then discharge right to the creek. So there's certainly an opportunity if the school district were ever to do a project to kind of rehab this area to provide detention in that area where it's like all the pipes and all the water already gets there. So we just got to find a way to collect it.
Right. Okay.
I think that's all. Well, we definitely took a look at what could we do to the existing dam? Could we just add an outlet structure on it and like have it have multiple levels and kind of let water out at different paces depending on how full it was? At its current like capacity with the volume behind it, that doesn't really work. We can slow down some small storms, but then it ends up overtopping faster in the larger storms. So that wasn't really an option. If you're going to do anything to the dam, you would need to increase the impoundment area behind it, which would require clearing a lot of trees, and it would also require like removing a lot of earth, and it's going to become a pretty costly endeavor. It's not something that I threw out completely. Like it's in here, it's a recommendation, but when we start to look at prioritizing, there's certain things that are maybe a little easier lift that I think we should look at first before we go all the way there.
Would that higher cost or, widening the dam or removing a lot of ground and trees, if we were to do that, would that resolve the problem, or would we still have?
No, it's we'll get to like how much each thing resolves the problem. But it's a situation where each thing will have an incremental benefit. If you put them all together, it'll have the most benefit, but it's not going to be it's not gonna solve everyone's problems. Like
There's
there's,
still gonna be flooding, or it's just not gonna be at.
it will not be as severe.
Sweeping part of the.
Is there any, I'm sorry. Is there anything that we could potentially do that would completely eliminate this problem 100% outside of eradicating the houses in schools? I mean, at this point, it's so far gone that it's
Yeah,
not.
no, I don't
You
think,
can't reverse it.
I don't think that there's anything that is realistically feasible that you could do. I mean, to me, this outline here in green is like what would need to be cleared and hogged out to create volume behind the dam to get a 1 foot drop in water surface elevation during a 100-year flood event.
And that's only gonna be 1 foot.
Yeah.
So in reality, like it's a situation where the development has impacted the creek and the neighborhood surrounding the creek to the point where it's almost irreversible, but we can take steps incrementally to kind of reduce at least the major flooding.
Yeah,
that
I
we
mean,
see,
to
like, in
me,
the
I
spring
think you're
storm.
gonna see, and if we keep going down, James, there's some, this here, we got a series of exhibits, but the gist of all of these is that this outline in green is the 100-year floodplain. So across there is how much is flooding during that time. The red one in the middle is the 2-year floodplain. So like you can see how much wider the swath is when you get 3 inches versus when you get 7.5 inches. But if you, can you zoom in, Jamie, on this area, like in here? This first one is just removing, it's not doing any of the upstream improvements. It's just removing or enlarging that driveway bridge off of Marion. So like the magenta line is what's existing. And then the red one here is what would be proposed. So like that whole area in hatched there is like what gets reduced by taking the bridge out or enlarging it. So it's mostly, you can see that like it pops out onto the street in even a 2-year storm with that bridge being modeled there. But when you take that bridge out, it's really not popping out onto the street. So, I mean, that's to me a decently significant situation. But you see no benefit in a 100-year flood for this scenario, just because like the bridge takes up a small part of the available flow in comparison to like everything that's inundated in a 100-year flood. But there is almost a 2-foot reduction in flow depth in a 2-year storm, like in this area.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a gentleman on the call or in the neighbor meeting that was concerned, well, taking that out, add more water downstream. And so we ran that analysis, and like you can see that the magenta and the red line, they come together just downstream of the bridge removal. So the floodplain is just normalized back to what it is.
That's significant.
Yeah, I do think it is. We can go to the next one. This is putting just a new basin at the corner of Houston and Knight. I put the peak flow analysis on here just because I think it's important. We analyzed flows at Knight Road at the culvert. And so by building that basin there and choking back some of the flow in that area. Can you page up, Jamie, just a tiny bit? I wanted to read those numbers off or down, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's good. So you're seeing about 20% flow reductions in all storms at that point in Knight Road by just building that basin on the corner. The one way to look at it is like your current stormwater ordinance requires you to choke back one storm in every scenario from a pre to post situation. And so you see like this 182 is real close to 191 and 234 is real close to 244. So like the more extreme event provides the same flow as a less extreme event in a post to pre situation. So like, to me, that's one thing that jumps out, that that's really, there's a benefit there. And it's like you were to redevelop the 38 acres and provide the stormwater management that should have been provided historically.
Do you, if, talk about incremental, you know, if you did one thing, two things, incremental, if we added your recommendations together, let's say there's 5 recommendations. What is 2 and 3 guys? Like, is it just simple math where if you get a,
No, it's not. But I have one. I don't have every iteration because it started to get a little
let's say
cumbersome, but we can,
the retention basin and the bridge.
yeah, go. We have, I have the basin, the bridge, or it's that one there, James. Yeah, we have the basin, the bridge, taking the bridge out, adding the basin, and redoing the dam. It's like the best you're gonna get. Yeah. But I see what you're saying, Mike. Like if the priorities are if the priorities are first, figure the bridge out, second, build the basin, then like what's 1 + 2? Get us. And that's something that I can easily do. I just don't have it right
There's
now.
the fiscal reality, right? Of we'd love to get a 66%, you know, in a 2-year store, 1-year store. We'd love to get a 66% reduction. But who knows if we're going to be able to come up with the funding. So it'd be good to know what it would be like individually or groups. So, but yeah, I mean, it seems to me as a layman that the retention basin and the driveway bridge, those 2 are significant things that would get us. I mean, if that's getting us 66%, maybe it gets us 40%. I mean, again, I know it's not exact math that way, but it seems like those might be easier lifts than.
I think the people living along the street would like to see is, you know, the maximum amount of relief, not just 60%. I mean, what are we talking about in terms of money for a retention basin? Is that hundreds of thousands of dollars or?
That maximum relief would include essentially the clear cutting of that whole area.
We have to clear cut
That
the
is
entire
maximum
range.
range, and that's all 3 options in fact.
That's all 3 together.
So the most that we can get is that
We're not reducing it 100%.
is 66%, it's a little bit over half. And you're saying that the dam itself is only 1 foot of reduction of flooding in a 100-year storm?
I'm saying if you page over, Jamie, to those tables on the right, oh, other way. All of these options together, this is the reduction to 100-year flood elevation. These first cross sections these are the ones in the areas we've been talking about. It's between 9 to 10 inches. The most you get is 1 foot, and this one here is a 1.5 feet.
Jim, is there?
So that, I mean, that's everything. Like,
That's the clear cutting behind the dam, which is. I don't even know if it's, I know I saw the numbers at one point, but forget about the numbers, the significance.
it's not, it's the costs. The cost is one thing.
Yeah,
The public perception of doing it
the environmental cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is another. The environmental, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And we don't own
So
Is there-
environmental, there's 2 sides to that coin. If you're preventing just willy-nilly running of stormwater down through this ditch and it's carrying oil and everything else with it, that's not a good environmental situation for the Wissahickon. And I would not, you know, I'm very pro tree and pro environment, but I would not be opposed to remediating this problem through putting in a proper storm catchment there. And we can always replant trees. The trees will come back as long as they're taken care of. But I just think it's not fair for us to say, okay, we're going to be happy and we're going to stop reducing this flow by 60%. That still means families along that street are going to have, a chance of being severely flooded.
I mean, I live on the street. I think I'm one of the people that are affected from the back, the sides and the front. We're gonna flood. Like, I've accepted that to some degree. I think if the highest amount of reduction that we can get is 66%, but what that includes is like a cost benefit analysis. We're gonna have to completely change the landscape of what that wooded area looks like, affect the wildlife, the trees,
It's not ours, right?
the natural vegetation, but we also have to remember, we don't even
No,
own.
no, you
It's
don't
the
own the
school
land.
district.
So there's the hurdle of getting someone to agree to do something on their land.
But
And
the-
then
yeah.
in the reality is that they're never going to do that if they have to own the dam in perpetuity.
Mhm.
So the township would
We would have
be
to
the most
acquire-
likely candidate to own the dam.
Is there anything, so we're just talking, we haven't gone north of the dam. Is there anything that can be done north of, I don't know if that's north, that's right, upstream of the dam? Yeah, like, is there any area?
There's no real area across Bethlehem Pike in Aileen and Judy, because those are all just, they're larger lots and there's no like common open space there. I think that potentially if the school district ever did anything with the track behind the middle school, like that's upstream of the dam, and that's an option. There was a study done a while ago that the school district had commissioned that looked at a piece of property on the corner. I think it's Aileen and Bethlehem Pike. It was Dr. Booth's old office.
Mhm.
And, let's put a basin there. But like when I look at how much space is there and what is just draining to that from across Aileen, like it's
There's
not
still
gonna
gonna be
provide the
enough going
benefit
on.
like that we're talking about. It's
Yeah.
not gonna be big enough.
Okay,
So it really is a cost benefit analysis as it relates to all of the things that we would have to embark upon. Potentially, financially, environmentally, and I respect the fact that it is going to be a benefit to the environment, but it also is going to be an impact. And then the perception of what that whole entire area will look like, at least until the trees grow back and until it gets situated.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's going to only at the best case scenario, 66%.
And to Jim's point, we're gonna wind up owning. That's
Yeah.
gonna be our headache.
But without the dam, I guess that's kind of what Mike was asking you, that large undertaking, which is a little bit outside of the realm of perceivable, but just because we don't own it and it's not on property, if we could do everything else but that, if we had a percentage of what that would look like. I think it's interesting to me.
that would be helpful information, because if it's only 20%, that, council's in favor of maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
maybe
so
that-
the reductions from a flow standpoint are gonna look they're not gonna look similar. They are going to be the exact same as the scenario where you just build the basin, because removing the driveway has no effect on, like, in that analysis, the flows existing and proposed are the same because you're not providing anything upstream to
Okay,
help out.
gotcha.
So to build just the basin, you're looking at a 20% reduction in flow, which equates to
Hmm.
4 or 5 inches in the 100-year elevation. Now, the flood elevations would change if we ran those proposed flows from the basin in the model with the bridge gone,
Fine.
because it'd be easier for it to get through. So that's one thing. I mean, it's certainly, yeah, but like the flows aren't going to change because there's only one improvement. Now, the flows could change in a positive way if we retrofit the existing basin and enlarge it, the one that's on the corner by the admin building.
Mhm.
Because so that these 20% reductions don't take that into account. So you could get potentially more. I'm not gonna
Could you
say.
give us those two, the base head,
Yeah,
and the retrofitting?
no, we can do that.
And then the removal of the bridge, and just tell us what that percentage is.
Yeah, sure.
Which is really good.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
I
thank
don't know
you.
if you're done, but I mean, it's.
We're getting closer.
The next slide is how we reduce it 100%.
And I also, I think like to Tessie's point, like we're making recommendations, we're prioritizing them.
Mhm.
There's nothing to say that this can't be a living document. And there's also nothing to say that like, just because the big lift with the dam is a lower on the priority now, that like a future board or future thinking, or you got all these 1, 2s, and 3s done and you're like, what else can we do? Oh, now let's do the big one. But I don't think that you can can't snap your fingers and to do them all at once. It's too big of a lift.
No, I'm just concerned that, I don't know, if we say we're not going to do what beyond the sort of 40-50% reduction, what message does that send? I mean, I'm just, well, it's a hypothetical, so we'll see what you have as a recommendation.
Okay. So this honestly just summarizes what we were talking about. So priority 1, exploring the potential for the replacement or enlargement of that driveway bridge. Priority 1 is, looking deeper into the roadway flooding at those intersections and kind of what can be done for Francis, Brookside, Knight. A lot. I can say that because we can't provide any detention on that like right side of the map, that any of the detention we talked about won't really help those people on Francis and then the rear yards of Brookside. So that's why I kind of lump these priorities together, because we want to try to like provide relief for everyone, at least at some scale in the beginning. And then, exploring the partnership with the school district to build that new basin and potentially retrofit the other basin. I think that like, because there's rate, volume, water quality, all those parts of that we certainly write some a pretty decent and competitive grant application for those. And there's some grants coming up here in the next couple months that we could, target there. And then, exploring the partnership with the school district for some kind of improvement to the dam, expansion of the dam, and or any other like BMPs that can happen on their site. I mean, they came in with those turf fields. It's unfortunate they don't drain this way, but they drain the other way. And so they're helping a different watershed. So I just think about it like a similar project to that. If it came in on this side of the hill, maybe, and
Do you
then
guys have a little flag set up? So when you're reviewing those proposals from the school district and making recommendations to the board,
yeah, I would,
Sure, you got it all.
I would not let anything happen within this watershed
Just making sure.
without trying to get something a little extra. And then just talking to PennDOT about the Spring Garden Street culvert. And those are really the recommendations from me to the township. And then, Ambler Yards, they know what their recommendations are too.
Thank you so much. Are there any additional questions from the board?
Is there, have you guys been in touch with, has there been an update to the residents on Brookside, or is this the update? Like,
They had this presentation.
okay,
They had this.
okay.
This is a
Specifically for them, and I think Jim just kind of talked to all the residents and they were invited, and
Thank you, Jim.
I mean, this one's recorded, so anyone who didn't get to, it's kind of the same exact presentation, they can review it, share it with anyone who wasn't able to see it live then or now.
Yeah, are you going to come back with some costs?
Yeah, sure. I will come back with some costs for everything. I mean, keep in mind that they will be budget and big round numbers, because without exploring things even further, I wouldn't really feel comfortable making cost estimates.
All we're trying to get is just a ballpark.
Yep, no, I understand that. And then I'll run one more analysis that is just removing the driveway bridge and building the basin on the corner of Houston and Knight. And we'll take a look at like some estimates for expanding the school district basin and lumping that all in there, kind of like
Yeah.
if this is priority one, this is what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
If we go down that path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from anyone in the public? Thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, next up, we have award bid for construction of the Spring House Phase 2 roadway improvements. I'm gonna turn it over to our traffic engineer. Ed Dixon.
Good evening. We've been in front of you on a couple occasions recently as we have been working to get the Springhouse intersection Phase 2 project permitted into construction. Since we were here the last time, we did receive the last permit from Montgomery County, and we put the project out to bid in mid-February. We opened bids last week on March 15th. And I believe you've received a copy of our recommendation of award letter based on the bids. The low bid came from James D. Morrissey Incorporated in the amount of $2,456,568.18. We're recommending to the board to consider awarding the contract to the low bidder. Overall, we were pleased with the bids that came in. The low bid was slightly lower than the most recent construction cost estimate that we did back in the fall of last year. So we were overall happy with what was received. So if the board is inclined to approve the contract award this evening, we tentatively have a pre-construction meeting scheduled for April 11th. And, the approximate start date would be later in April. We'll begin to work with the staff on notifying residents within the immediate area of the intersection. And then we'll begin developing information to post on the township website for everybody to see as the project gets started and progresses. Any questions?
None. Are there any questions from the public?
All right.
So we have before us the recommendation by McMahon for the Morrissey, James D. Morrissey Incorporated, and he gave us the amount $2,456,568.18. I'd like to make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
As for the approval of that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is consideration of extension of an option deadline for Wells Fargo lease. We did have a memo in our manager's report, but I am going to turn it over to our solicitor for explanation.
Thank you. Wells Fargo has a lease for a branch bank just next door on township property. Their lease is expiring and they have until April 30th to decide whether or not to exercise their first option for an additional 5 years. They're in the process of changing their system for management of their real estate sites, and they have approximately 7,000 locations in the United States that they have to modify to the new system. So they have respectfully requested a 30-day extension in which to exercise their option until May 31st.
So the recommended action is to extend it. I'm going to make a motion to extend the deadline for Wells Fargo to exercise their lease option to renegotiate their lease from April 30th to May 31st. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. Next up is a consideration of the extension of our 2-year option for trash and recycling haulers contract. Amy, do you want to give a brief overview since the memo from you?
So our current trash contract expires on October 30th of 2023. Under the current contract, we have an option to extend for a 2-year period. We had reached out to Republic. We reached out to the Montgomery County Consortium. We got some feedback from municipalities that are single hauler and what they have been seeing in the bids that they have gone out, and they all came back that they were seeing about a 50% increase. When we talked 50, when we talked with Republic, they gave us an average of about 47%, which was consistent with what the other municipalities had said. So the input we got kind of gave us the direction that we should probably exercise this extension until it's not so, so that, things settle down, and maybe when we're up in 2 years, maybe we'll get some better pricing. So we're recommending that we exercise this option. And the way our contract is right now, the way they did their bid was there was a slight modification each year of the contract, about a 3%. So they are going to just continue that with the 2 years.
Jamie, do you know what's behind that sharp increase?
They had said some of the labor, same like labor shortage. They don't have a lot of laborers, and just the cost, I guess, associated with the collection. We have a joint, like our contract includes the trash collection and the recycling. I guess some municipalities actually separate that. That's a major issue too. And they're able to, they're actually really being selective about what contracts they bid on. And if they can get into a municipality and use the trash trucks that have the mechanical arm, that can keep their costs down because they don't have to hire the laborer. So, but that's just kind of what they're seeing. Just the cost of doing business is really what it is.
So a lot of that cost may be associated with using the landfill.
Yeah.
So we don't really have any, or at least in my mind, a lot of hope that prices are going to moderate.
I don't know.
You don't know. Fair enough.
Any additional questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we have the recommendation from our staff to exercise the option to extend the trash collection with the Republic Service for the permitted 2-year period. It does indicate in the memo that it would provide uninterrupted collection for township residents and also minimize the cost. And that 3% increase would be going from $96.60 per quarter to $93.32 in year 4 and $96.12 in year 5. So what I would like to do is make a motion to approve. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
And carried. Thank you much. Next up is resolution 2023-10, the disposition of records. Is there a bee? Sorry, there was a bee. Is it a fly or is it a bee? Oh my God.
No.
Jamie, while we're observing that flying thing, at the end of the 2-year contract, then will we go out for bids again?
Okay. No, you've got to get a tissue, Jamie.
So this is really interesting. Come on, Ramsden. Jim. Mike's not helping.
You just got to get tissue. Thank
Thank
you, Jim.
Yes, Tessie, at the end of the 2-year extension, we'll go out to bid again.
Have we in general gotten any good or bad feedback about Republic?
We've gotten both. We've gotten people that hate Republic. We've gotten people that love Republic. We've gotten people that wish that Waste Management was still here. I would say that the calls that I get are the same calls I got when Waste Management was here. So it's not, it's the same.
Thank you
Yeah.
for your service, Jim.
I think one of the concerns from the EAC is some of the members of the EAC are uncomfortable with the whole recycling effort. We had the presentation about how the recycling effort works, but it was pretty